So today we will be taking a look at the Android tool setup. So here I will be taking you through what are the tools we would be needing for creating the Android application. And we would also take a look at how you can download them and how you can set up on your personal computers. So Android Studio is the software which is launched by the Google and which we use for creating the Android applications. So if some of you might have tried Android application development like 6 months before or 1 year before, you must be knowing about Eclipse also. So previously we used to use Eclipse for creating the Android application. That is IDE, that is Integrated Development Environment, like Visual Studio or the C++ editor, something like that. But nowadays we use Android Studio because it is much more advanced than the Eclipse. And the second reason is Google has dropped support for the Eclipse and now they are supporting Android Studio. So we would be learning to use the Android Studio. So Android SDK is, so I would say, Shanti, Android SDK is the combination of the app framework and the library. So it has got everything built in. So that's why it has got a very large size, I would say. So it will have all the app framework libraries and it will also have those embedded libraries which you would be using for creating the applications. So I would say every component are tied together. So you cannot have the app framework without the library, or you cannot have the library without the app framework. So basically, so whenever you will have the SDK, so all the things are there. And I would certainly send you the link. So what I would do is I would just click on that particular link. So as you can see, when you will click on that link, it will take you through the Android Studio. So let me send you all the link. So guys, just confirm me over the chat window if you have all received the link for the Android Studio. So you can put it for download or you can download it after the session. So guys, please confirm me over the chat window if you all have received the link or not, or I will send you once again. Okay, that's really great. So you have all received the link. So from here, you would be downloading the Android Studio for depending on which platform you are using. So if you are using Mac, you can download it for Mac, for Windows, for Linux. So depending on your operating system. So once you download it, so if you download it on Windows, you would be getting the standalone exe file. So you just have to double click on that exe file and you can start the installation of the Android Studio over there. Okay, so once you install the Android Studio, so if you are on the Windows, so it will get installed in the program files. So you would see something like this. Okay, and there is one thing which we have not kept in the slides is the Java installation part. So as we know, Android runs on the Java. So if you want to install and start working with the Android Studio, before that, you have to install the latest version of Java. So the latest version that is available in market now is the Java 1.8. So I would recommend you to install the Java before Android Studio. If you don't have Java and if you try to install the Android Studio, you would get the error. And you can always change the installation. So you can save it in C drive, you can save it in D drive. So it is like a normal Windows file. It is like a normal Windows setup. You can always point out the different installation locations over there. And Shanti, Android Studio needs at least Java 1.7. So it will need at least Java 1.7 to start working. So if you have got Java 1.5 or 1.6, so it might not work properly, I would say. So guys, so you can set up it now or you can set up this after the session also. So there is no such hardcore requirement that you should be practicing with me. So you can practice it in your own free time. So I would recommend you to concentrate on the session and then you can do it. Or if you have very good bandwidth, you can download it right now also. Okay, so yeah. So you would see here. So the Android Studio by default, it gets installed in the C program files and Android folder over there. Okay, so I'm going to close that panel. let's move on to the slides again. And guys, if you ever face the problem during the installation, I will send you one more email ID. So if you get any issues while the installation or any general purpose issues, you can always reach out to support@edureka.co. Okay, so the website is support@edureka.co. Okay, so I'm sending you the email ID. So if you get any difficulties while installation or something like that, please drop a mail to them and they would certainly help you out with the issues that you are facing. Okay, so we have got the Android Studio setup where we are downloading the Android Studio, and these are the requirements which we have. So I would say down point of Android Studio is it requires the very good hardware on your computer. So it would require, I would say, at least Core i3 processor. It would require 2 GB of RAM. It is recommended by the, it is listed down by the Google, but I would say you would require at least 4 GB of RAM. You would require at least 500 MB of hard disk space. So I think we would always have the greater than 500 MB. So Android Studio SDK will take at least 1 GB out of that. So 1280 by 800, that is the minimum resolution that would require. We would require minimum SDK version, Java version as 7. And as I said, you should require the latest version of processor. Why? Because if you want to install the applications on the emulator, you would require the latest processor. So Android emulator are, I would say, there are a lot of bugs in the Android emulator. So normally, I would say 80% of the time, we always prefer to install the applications on the physical device which we have. So we just connect our device to the laptop and we install the applications on that instead of Android emulator, because Android emulator has got a lot of bugs over there. So I would encourage you, if you have the physical device, just connect it and try to install the applications on the device. Vinayak, you can use Eclipse, but I would recommend you to install and run the Android Studio, because Eclipse doesn't have a great support to the latest version of Android, that is 5.0. So that's the reason. And Mohammed, I did not try Windows 10 preview version, but I think it should just work. Since it is Windows, I think it should just work. You can give it a try and let us know. And I got a question, can I use Eclipse and Studio? Oh, okay. So I misunderstood your question, Vinayak. So you can install both the IDEs at the same time. So that's not an issue. So those will not collide with each other. So you can have both of them. Okay. So yeah. So when you will download the Android Studio, and when you will start the Android Studio, you will be getting a screen, something like this. Okay. So where you would able to create the new applications, where you would be able to import the existing applications and you can install the SDK platforms. So remember, Android Studio is just a front-end editor where you will be writing the code. But behind the scene, Android Studio is going to use the SDK. So always remember, Android Studio doesn't, so it is not like something like SDK is a part of Android Studio. So Android Studio is the separate application and SDK is a separate thing. So behind the scene, Android Studio uses the SDK for compiling your applications. So it's just an editor. So rather than typing the applications in the notepad, you would always use the Android Studio for creating the applications. So let me take you through the steps of creating the applications. Okay, so I will exit the slides. So let me start the Android Studio. So I have created a shortcut of it on the toolbar. So I will launch the Android Studio. Okay, so what happens is, so whenever you open the Android Studio, it will try to open the project which you have created earlier. So in your case, it will just show you the blank window. But in my case, in the morning, I was creating some other applications. So it is opening that application. So what I would do is I would just close that application. I would just close that project. So as you can see, so when you will launch the Android Studio, you would be seeing this particular screen. over there. Okay, so yep. So as you can see here, we will be having the options to. So basically, we will be having two panels. One is the left hand side panel and one is the right hand side panel. So on the left hand side panel, it will be showing you the list of the applications which you have created earlier. So it is very useful. So let's say a couple of days back, I am creating some applications and today I want to continue working on those applications. So rather than searching it on the disk, what you can do, you can just pick it from the recent projects. So that's the advantage that you get. And on the right hand side, you can create the new projects over there. So on the right hand side, you will see one option that is called as the configure. Okay, so if you go on the configure option, what you can do is you can configure the SDK which has come with the Android Studio. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to click on the configure option over there. Okay, so I will click on configure. So there you will see the lot of things that Android Studio uses behind the scenes. So one of the most important thing that Android Studio uses, it is called as the SDK manager. So I will click on SDK manager. So SDK stands for Software Development Kit. So it contains all the set of APIs which are required for compiling your Android applications. Okay, so you can see. So when I clicked on SDK manager, it has opened the Android SDK. And what happens is it shows you all the tools which are present as a part of the compilation process. So basically, you will have a different panels, different options. So let me take you through those. So first option is the tool option. So tool options contain set of libraries which are required to compile your applications. So you have to always make sure that you are installing the latest versions. So I have got 24.1.2, 22 and 22.0.1. So if you notice here what Android does, so every couple of weeks, they release the updated version of build tools. So what you can do is, every couple of weeks, what I do is I always go into this SDK manager and I check if there is any update available or not. So as you can see over here, so I'm seeing there that update available for this SDK platform. So similar thing you will also see for the build tools or platform tools or the tools. So whenever you see something like that, just check that checkbox and click on the update packages. So when you will click on update packages, what it is going to do, it is going to update those packages for you. So we have to always make sure that we are using the latest version of everything. So I haven't updated the SDK platform because I just saw that update before the session, and normally what I do is, so I don't take a chance, because sometimes what happens, if you update the SDK, your older applications, you might have to recompile them. So that's why what I did is I just thought of taking some time before applying that update. So maybe after this session, I would update that SDK platform for 5.1. But in your case, you would not require to do that now, because you will be downloading the latest thing. And whenever Google release any new update, they always publish the latest setup on the website. So if you download the latest setup, I think you would have everything built in. But maybe after a couple of weeks or after a month, you would have to update the existing setup. So what you have to make sure is you are downloading the latest Android SDK tools, you are downloading the Android SDK platform tools, and you are downloading the Android SDK build tools. And I've got a question from Mohammed. Do we need to keep the previous versions after updating, or we can safely uninstall? So Mohammed, so guys, you can safely uninstall the older versions. Just make sure that you are using the latest one. And okay, so Mike is facing some issue. x86 simulation currently require hardware. So Intel properly install, and this module is not installed. Okay, so guys, one of the error that you will see. So okay, so Mike, I will answer to your question. Just let me complete this particular topic. Then I will come back to your question. Okay, so these are the things that you would require to install. Those are the tools. Once the tools are installed, what you will do, you will take the latest API, that is 5.1. And I try to install as minimum things as possible because that takes a lot of time and it also takes some disk space. So what I'm installing here, I'm just installing the SDK platform, which will have all the set of libraries which would require for creating the Android application. I have not installed the Android TV emulator because we are not creating the applications for Android TV. I have not installed the something like x86 Atom system image. So you can see, so everything that is present below Android TV, it is related to the Android emulator. So in case if you want to create the Android emulator and test out the things, you should install all those options basically. Okay, so in my case, what I'm going to do is, since Android emulator doesn't work very well on my computer, I would be running the application on my personal device and I will be projecting the screen to you guys so that you can see the output. So that's why even though I have installed those emulator related topics or the things, but still the emulator doesn't work very well on my computer. It works, but it is very slow, I would say. So it takes 10 minutes to boot up. If you launch any application, so again, it will take more 5 minutes to launch that application on the emulator. So that is very, very slow. So that's why I prefer using the physical device. Okay, but anyways, if you plan to use the emulator, just make sure that you are downloading everything that is present below Android TV. So I would be installing EABI, x86, everything that is present below the Android TV. Okay, so once you install those things, then you are ready to develop the applications for the Android platform. Okay, in case if you are planning to run your applications on the physical device, just install the SDK. That is enough. But if you want to install the applications on the emulator also, then install the SDK and also install the other things like Google API, Intel x86, Atom image, and all other things basically. Okay, so the very common issue that you will face once you download all those things, so the next thing that you will be doing over here is, okay, so before that, guys, can you please confirm me over the chat window, is that SDK installation part is clear to all of you? So that part is also present in the PDF file which is uploaded on the LMS, so that you can also take a look at that PDF file where we have got the installation steps. But just would like to confirm, are you all clear about these installation steps which I shown you now? Any questions in those? Yeah, and the top, if you see, you will see the Android SDK part. So Shanti, that is the part of the Android Studio setup. So I haven't downloaded that SDK separately. So Android Studio, when you will download, it will be around 800 MB. So when you will install that SDK will also get installed automatically. So you don't need to download it separately. And Vivek, we have got a lot of options. So just make sure that you are just going into the 5.1 and downloading all the things which are present in 5.1. So the advantage is if you are downloading the latest SDK, you can create the applications for earlier versions also. So no need to download the SDK for the earlier versions. Just download the SDK for the latest version. And what is an emulator? So again, that's a really good question from Abhi. Okay, so before answering to that question, guys, I would like to know, do you know what is meant by emulator? And if yes, can you answer me over the chat window? Can you tell me what is meant by emulator? So those of you know what is meant by emulator, you can answer me on chat window. So I will read out your answers and I will also add few of my hints to those answers. Okay, so I have got a few of the very clear answers from all of you, and yes, so those are very correct answer. So in a simple words, so what is an emulator means? So emulator is like something which is emulating the real world. So a very good example that I would like to give you, and when I started with the Android development, I was also confused about what is meant by emulator. So on one website, they had given a very good example. So in the World War I and World War II, so what used to happen, they used to have a lot of pilots and they used to drive the fighter planes. So they were very young pilots. So it was not possible that you would directly deploy a person on the plane and you would start expecting from him that he would shoot down the enemy. So what they used to do, they used to give them the emulator model. So it was not the actual aeroplane, it was just like an emulator, and they would emulate the scenario like the war is happening. And those emulators would have a guns and they could just shoot from those guns. So it is just for the practice purpose. And once they gain the expertise in that, then they used to drive the actual aeroplane, just to avoid the loss of life or the loss of aeroplane. So in the same way in Android, anyways, we are not doing a war, but it is the same concept. So what happens is, let's say if you don't have the access to the device, so it should not stop you from learning the Android development, right? So what you can do is, in case if you don't have the access to the device, you can create the application and you can test your applications on the emulator. But I would always recommend that you should always test your applications on the real device. Why? Because at the end of the day, you are always going to run your applications on the actual device, not on the emulator. So I got a very good question from the Syed. What is the difference between emulator and simulator? So Syed, a simulator is something like it will just have a look and feel. So a very good example that I would like to give you is let's say you have created a simulator, Android simulator. So that Android simulator will use my computer resources. So it would use 4 GB of RAM, it would use 500 GB of hard disk. But the emulator, it will try to emulate the actual environment. So even if you install it on the computer, it will just give you 2 GB of RAM, it will just give you 8 GB of hard disk. So that's the difference. Simulator is more of a like look and feel, but emulator is like more of a physical hardware configuration also. So that's the difference between emulator and simulator. Okay, so does that answer your question, Syed? Okay, and I tend to speak little bit faster. So guys, at any moment, if you are feeling that my speed is it is beyond so what you can take, so just let me know and I will slow down. Okay, so yeah, so that is the SDK that we have installed. I will just close it down. And one of the questions that I have received is, so when you install the SDK and when you start launching the emulator, you would be getting an error that x86 installation did not found or something like that. So there is one additional step that you have to do is, after you have installed the SDK and if you are planning to use the built-in Android emulator, then in that case, one additional thing that you will have to do is, you will have to go into the SDK manager. I will go to the command prompt. Okay, rather I will go to the run and I will type down that SDK path which you are seeing over there. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll type down that SDK path over there. So I will type C users Vipul Shah app data local Android SDK. So what I'm doing, I'm just going into that SDK path which I'm seeing on the top. Okay, so what you have to do is, after going into that, you have to go into the extras and you have to go into the Intel. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll copy paste this path and I'll send it to you guys. Okay, so the only thing that you might have to change is my username. So in your case, it will be a different thing. Okay, so if you go there, so you will see the Intel setup. So that setup you will have to run before starting the Android emulator. So the requirement is your computer should support the VirtualBox. So VirtualBox, it is supported by the latest computer CPUs. So if your computer doesn't support VirtualBox, like mine, my computer doesn't support VirtualBox, so you would not able to run the emulators on your computer. So in that case, you will have to run the applications on the actual device. So what you have to do is, you just have to double click on that setup file. So you can see, so right now I'm getting a message. This computer doesn't support Intel virtualization technology. So that's an unfortunate thing for me. But if you are using the latest operating system, latest hardware, then you can just complete the setup and after that start the Android emulator and it should work. Okay, so what you have to do after downloading the Android SDK, you have to go into the SDK folders, extras, Intel and hardware acceleration manager folder, and from there you have to install the latest Android Intel executor. Okay, so once the execution is successful, just restart your computer and you should start the Android emulator, which I will show you how to start. Okay, so I think David, you were facing this issue. I'm not sure whether it was asked by David or Mike, but I think it is clear to you guys. Okay, so can you confirm me over the chat window? Is it clear to you? Okay, so it was asked by David. Okay, great. Shanti, so you have said no. So Shanti, can you tell me what part is not clear to you? So your Android Studio says, please provide the path of the Android SDK. So Shanti, have you newly installed the Android SDK, Android Studio, or you had previously installed the Android Studio and you are opening it? Can you tell me? So accordingly, I can tell you the solution. Okay, you had installed it 2 days back. Okay, so you are facing the SDK installation issue, but opening only now. Okay, so Shanti, what I would recommend you to do is, so once this session is over, try to install the latest version of Java, and you should not get this error basically. But if you are getting this error, try to uninstall the Android Studio and install it again. I would recommend you, and just see if that solves the issue. In case if it doesn't solve the issue, please put a mail to me so that I can go into much deep just to see what is happening. So Rimi, we are installing the Intel Hacks Execution Manager because so Android uses the latest version of Intel technology in their emulators just to maximize the speed. So it is something related to the Intel hardware. So that's why they have given us this setup which we have to install before starting the Android emulator. So in a simple words, if you don't install the Intel HackSem setup and if you try to launch the Android emulator, you would get the error. So we have to install it just to start the Android emulator. Shanti, that path was automatically taken by the Android Studio. It did came automatically. I did not specify the path. So I was just wondering why it is not taking that path in your case. So just try to uninstall and reinstall and see if that works. And the minimum version of Windows for Android Studio, I would say it is Windows 7. So you would require Windows 7 and above. Shanti, Android SDK and Studio are the different things, yes, but they are packed together in Android Studio setup. So that's those different things. So previously what used to happen is we used to download Android Studio separately, we used to download SDK separately, but later Google packed those things in a single setup so that you don't need to download them separately, basically. Okay, and I got a question from Nola. You mentioned that we should program for 4.1 and above. So why are we using download the latest? So Nola, what happens is if you download the latest version of Android Studio, so in that case, what happens is it will also support the older versions. So it is always like that. So if you download the version for the 5.0, it will always contain the APIs which are found out in 4.1. But if you download the SDK for 4.1, it would not have the APIs which are present above the 4.1. So that's why we are downloading the latest version. And in that way, we can also support the older versions which are present over there.